6 months after my fiancée vanished, a number I didn't recognize sent me a message. I was sitting at my kitchen table, checking the catering order for a family gathering that weekend. I had just noticed they'd listed 12 bottles of sparkling water instead of 20 when my phone buzzed beside my laptop. The message said, "I've had time to heal. I forgive you for making me leave." I read it twice. There was no name, but I knew who had written it. Vanessa had always been good at turning an accusation into a gift. Even when she blamed you, she wanted credit for being generous about it. I had blocked her old number after our remaining bills and belongings were settled. Apparently, she had found another one. I stared at the screen until 3 dots appeared, vanished, and appeared again. Then I typed, "Who is this?" My phone rang immediately. I let it ring. She called again. I watched her second call die on the screen. A new message arrived. "You know exactly who this is." I started typing a paragraph. For 6 months, I had imagined what I would say if she came back. Some versions were angry. Others were cruel enough to make me ashamed afterward. I erased the whole thing. Then I wrote, "The woman I knew would have apologized." Her reply didn't come right away. That was the first sign she hadn't expected me to sound like someone who had moved on. Vanessa and I had been together for 4 years. We had been engaged for 8 months when she left. People sometimes asked why our engagement party had taken so long to happen. The answer was Vanessa. At first, we were going to have a simple dinner with our families. Then she wanted a private room. After that, she wanted a better restaurant because the first one had poor lighting. Then relatives from out of state needed time to make travel arrangements. By the end, the party had become something neither of us could afford without pretending we could. Before all that, our life had been ordinary in ways I once thought made it solid. We ate breakfast every Saturday at a diner where the waitress stopped asking for our order. We were saving for a brick house outside Pittsburgh with a small yard and a garage where I could keep tools without storing them under the bed. I drove a 7-year-old sedan that started every morning. Vanessa used to call it dependable, like me. Then she was promoted at the arts non-profit where she worked. Her new position put her around donors, hotel owners, gallery directors, and people who attended fundraisers because their names appeared on buildings. At first, I was proud of her. Vanessa was good at making people comfortable. She remembered which donor had a daughter studying abroad, and which board member hated sitting near the speakers. She knew how to solve problems without making the person who caused them feel foolish. Then she started judging our life through photographs. Our apartment became too small. My car became something she didn't want parked near an event entrance. The diner where we had spent hundreds of Saturday mornings became a place she would visit only if nobody from work was likely to see her. I told myself she was adjusting to a new world. I didn't understand that she had started viewing me through the eyes of people who barely knew either of us. That was how Adrien Vale entered our relationship. Vanessa met him while coordinating a fundraiser at one of his rooftop venues. Adrien owned boutique hotels and event spaces around the city. He was the kind of man who remembered everyone's name because making people feel recognized gave him control over the room. He was also useful. When a scheduling mistake threatened Vanessa's fundraiser, Adrien followed her solution instead of overruling her. Later, he praised her in front of the board. Vanessa talked about that moment for days. The first time I met him was at a donor reception. Vanessa introduced us near the bar. Adrien shook my hand and asked what I did. "I handle purchasing for a restaurant supply company," I said. He smiled. "That must be peaceful. No pressure to impress anyone." Vanessa laughed. It was a small laugh, almost automatic, but I felt it in my chest for the rest of the night. On the drive home, I told her the comment had bothered me. "He was joking," she said. "He was insulting me." "You always do this around successful men." "Do what?" "Look for reasons to feel threatened." I tightened my hands around the steering wheel. I wasn't threatened. I was standing there while he spoke to me like I was slow. Vanessa looked out the passenger window. You make everything harder than it needs to be. After that, Adrien rarely insulted me directly. He didn't need to. He sent cars for Vanessa and acted surprised when she reminded him I was attending too. He asked her questions while I was still answering him. He joked that I kept her grounded, as though she would float toward a better life the moment I released her ankle. Once, at another event, he raised his glass and said, "Some people build lives, other people build legacies." His eyes moved toward me for half a second. Vanessa saw it. She smiled anyway. Soon she began repeating his language at home. She said she wanted to stop being afraid. She said stability could become a cage if you weren't careful. She said people sometimes stayed in relationships because they lacked the courage to demand more. 1 week before our engagement party, she stood in our kitchen criticizing the cake. "It looks like something from a retirement dinner," she said. "It's cake." "That's exactly your problem." I set down the folder containing the final vendor invoices. "What is my problem?" "You think everything is good enough. The cake tastes good, the restaurant is paid for, our families are coming. It's all so ordinary." I looked at her for a long moment. "Do you still want the marriage, or do you just want a better-looking party?" Her face changed. She folded her arms and said, "I want a life that feels bigger than this." The next morning, she was gone. Half her closet was empty. Her suitcase was missing. Her engagement ring sat on the kitchen counter beside a handwritten note. "I'm finally brave enough to choose the life I deserve." I called her once. She declined it. By that evening, a photograph appeared online showing Vanessa beside Adrien on the terrace of his New York hotel. The trip had clearly been planned. She was wearing the coat I had bought her for Christmas. I spent the next 3 days canceling our engagement party. Every phone call forced me to explain just enough for people to understand why the event was no longer happening. Vanessa never called me. She spoke to everyone else. By the end of the week, mutual friends had heard that I was possessive. I resented her promotion. I made her feel guilty for growing beyond me. Her cousin Paige came to my apartment one evening and held out her phone. "I thought you should see this before somebody else shows you in a worse way." The screen displayed a private group chat. Vanessa had written, "Daniel is a good man, but good is what women settle for when they're afraid they can't do better." My hands went cold. I had spent 4 years believing that being reliable mattered to her. She had once said she trusted me because I did what I promised. Now she was using those same qualities as proof that I was beneath her. I took a screenshot. Paige asked, "Are you going to respond?" "No." "You should tell people what really happened. Anyone who wants to know can ask me." Several people did. I sent them the same message. Vanessa ended our engagement without warning. Everything else is her story to answer for. My silence made some people uncomfortable. A few assumed it meant I had something to hide. Vanessa apparently assumed it meant I was broken. For a while, she wasn't completely wrong. I stopped sleeping through the night. I kept waking up at the hour she usually came home from late events. I would hear a car door outside and feel my body tense before my mind caught up. Then I would remember that she had left the ring on the counter and flown to New York with a man who enjoyed making me look small. A month later, I was clearing the last of my electronics from the apartment we had shared. I opened our tablet to remove my accounts before resetting it. Vanessa's email was already open in the browser. I didn't search through her folders, I didn't need to. The visible thread was with Adrien. The dates were from 3 weeks before she vanished. Vanessa had asked whether leaving before the engagement party would make her look reckless. Adrien's reply was right below it. "Only if you let him tell the story first." I read the line until the screen dimmed. Their trip hadn't been a sudden decision made after an argument. She had planned the timing. She had wanted me standing in the wreckage of a canceled engagement party while photographs showed her entering a richer world. I took pictures of the visible messages with my phone, signed out of her account, and reset the tablet. I still didn't post them. Part of me wanted to. Another part understood that Vanessa would turn any public response into another chapter about my jealousy. So I kept the evidence in case her accusations ever reached my job or damaged my relationship with my family. Then I moved out. My mother helped me find a small house that needed work. The floors leaned slightly toward the center, and the kitchen cabinets looked older than I was. I liked it immediately. It was the first decision I made without wondering whether Vanessa would consider it impressive. A few weeks later, my mother asked Elise Warren to help me sort the unopened engagement gifts. Elise had been my younger sister's closest friend since college. She had known my family for 12 years. She and I had briefly dated almost a decade earlier, before she left Pennsylvania for graduate training. The relationship had ended because neither of us wanted the other to abandon a life that was just beginning. We had stayed friendly, but distant. There had been no secret messages while I was with Vanessa, no emotional affair waiting in the background. When Elise returned to Pittsburgh, she had started joining my family for birthdays and holidays again. That was all. On the afternoon we sorted the gifts, she found a silver serving tray engraved with the wedding date Vanessa and I never reached. Elise turned it face down. "Keep, return, or destroy." I laughed before I could stop myself. She looked at me. "I'm serious. I know someone with access to power tools." "Donate it." "With the engraving?" "Maybe somebody named Daniel and Vanessa is getting married that day." That would be unsettling. It was the first easy conversation I had experienced in weeks. Nothing happened between us that afternoon. It happened slowly afterward. We delivered unused wedding decorations to a community center. I helped move donated kitchen equipment into the school where Elise worked. She called me when a cabinet door in her classroom nearly came off its hinges, and I fixed it while she finished paperwork at her desk. We shared dinner after my mother's birthday because everyone else left early. Elise asked questions without trying to solve me. One night I admitted I no longer trusted compliments. Vanessa used to praise the same things she later mocked, I said. Elise stirred her coffee. Maybe she liked those qualities until somebody convinced her they wouldn't impress strangers. I looked at her. She shrugged. That doesn't mean she was lying before. It means she let other people decide what mattered. Even then, Elise was careful. When it became clear that our old connection was returning, she stopped me outside her car. "I need to ask you something uncomfortable." "Go ahead." "Are you reaching for me because I'm familiar?" The question stung because it was fair. "I don't know yet," I said. She nodded. "Then we shouldn't pretend you do." We didn't start dating that night. We gave it time. By the time we tried again, we had already talked about Vanessa, our old relationship, and the possibility that grief could make comfort feel like love. Elise never asked me to prove I was over Vanessa. She watched how I lived. While I was rebuilding, Vanessa was appearing beside Adrien at hotel launches, charity auctions, and rooftop dinners. Friends sent me photographs until I asked them to stop. Later, one mutual acquaintance told me Vanessa kept asking whether I had posted anything emotional. "She seemed irritated that you hadn't," he said. I almost laughed. Adrien introduced her as fearless and brilliant. He praised her in public. He never called her his partner. He never gave her a key. He avoided every conversation about a future. Vanessa stayed because the photographs made her decision look correct. She also introduced Adrien to nonprofit directors, event organizers, and wealthy donors. She didn't steal records or hand over secret files. She made social introductions. She explained which people were interested in hotel projects and which ones could connect him to investors. Once Adrien had those relationships, he began contacting people without including her. He cut her out of meetings she had arranged. Then came the hotel launch. I learned what happened through Paige. Vanessa had sent her a voice message that night, crying so hard her words blurred together. Later, when Vanessa began telling people that I had reopened our relationship, Paige forwarded it to me. In the recording, Vanessa said she arrived at the launch expecting to sit beside Adrien. Her name had been removed from the private dinner list. Adrien arrived with Camille Arden, the 27-year-old daughter of an investor whose family was considering financing his next hotel. Vanessa confronted him. According to her own voice message, Adrien said, "You knew what this was. Don't rewrite it because you expected more." Within 2 weeks, Vanessa vanished from his public events. Then my phone lit up. "I've had time to heal. I forgive you for making me leave." After I replied, she sent me a long voice note. She said Adrien had manipulated her. She said my refusal to fight for her had confirmed that leaving was necessary. She described how Adrien had used her connections and replaced her. Then she said she had forgiven me for making her feel trapped. When the message ended, I sat in silence. She had spent 9 minutes describing what happened to her. She had used 12 seconds describing what she did to me. I replied, "Before you speak to me about us, correct what you told everyone about me." Her answer came almost immediately. "I will." Then the questions started. Would my parents be there? Could we meet somewhere meaningful? Did I still have her ring? The ring was still in a locked drawer at my house. I had kept it because I had paid for it, and because dealing with it had never felt urgent. Vanessa apparently believed I had preserved it for her. At that point, Elise and I were already engaged. I had proposed the week before Vanessa's message. Only our parents knew we had planned a small announcement dinner at my parents' house. That was the catering order I had been reviewing when Vanessa contacted me. When she asked for an audience, I agreed to let her arrive early and speak to the people she had misled. I told her, "Everyone you misled will be in one room. I will handle the venue and the guest list. Say clearly what you did. Don't blame Adrien. Don't blame me. Tell the truth or don't come." She promised she would be there. Then she began telling people I had opened the door. She contacted her parents. She asked one of her old bridesmaids whether the photographer from our canceled engagement party was available. My sister called me after hearing about it. "She thinks you're getting back together." I never said that. She says you wouldn't invite her in front of both families unless you wanted her back. I rubbed my forehead. "Did you tell her?" "I told her to listen to your actual words." Vanessa had already decided what my words meant. I showed Elise the messages. She read them twice. "I don't love this," she said. "I know. Our engagement announcement shouldn't become a show about Vanessa. It won't. She thinks it will." I told her what the meeting is. Elise placed my phone on the table. "Are you hoping to hurt her?" I considered lying. Instead, I said, "I know it will hurt her." That wasn't my question. I looked toward the window. I want her lie to stop belonging to me. Elise was quiet. Then she set 3 conditions. Vanessa's conversation would happen before the celebration officially began. Nobody would record it or post it for entertainment. Once Vanessa corrected the story, the conversation would end. I agreed. Vanessa arrived at my parents' house 45 minutes before the engagement dinner. She wore a pale blue dress I had once told her I loved. Her makeup was soft, careful. In one hand, she carried an empty velvet ring box. She expected me to place the ring inside. Most of the decorations were still in the dining room. She could see covered catering trays in the kitchen and flower boxes in the hallway, but nothing that revealed the purpose of the celebration. She hugged my mother before my mother had fully opened her arms. Then she came close to me. "Thank you for giving us another chance." I stepped back. "You came to correct the story." Her smile held for 1 second too long. Then she nodded. In the living room sat my parents, Vanessa's parents, my sister, Paige, and 2 friends who had received Vanessa's accusations. Vanessa stood near the fireplace. She began with a speech about losing herself. She said she had been overwhelmed by a new world. She said Adrien was powerful and knew how to manipulate people. She said pain had caused all of us to make mistakes. I let her speak for less than a minute. Then I said, "Tell them what you did, not what happened to you afterward." Her fingers tightened around the ring box. "I'm trying to explain." "You're explaining Adrien." She glanced at her mother. I was confused. I placed a printed screenshot of the group chat on the coffee table. "Did I ever tell you to quit your job?" "No." "Did I stop you from attending events?" "No, but you made me feel." "Did I stop you?" She looked down. "No." I placed the printed email thread beside the screenshot. Her father leaned forward and read the dates. His face changed. "This was 3 weeks before the party," he said. Vanessa swallowed. Her mother asked, "You planned it?" "It wasn't like that." Paige spoke from the sofa. "You asked Adrien whether leaving before the party would make you look reckless." Vanessa's eyes moved toward her. "You showed them?" "I showed Daniel what you sent me. He deserved to know." Vanessa looked at me again. "I was scared people would judge me." "So you gave them me to judge instead." She pressed her lips together. One of our former friends pointed toward the group chat screenshot. "You told us he was holding you back." "I felt held back." "Did he hold you back?" Vanessa's shoulders lowered. "No." The admissions came slowly after that. I asked direct questions. My parents said almost nothing. Her father checked the dates again, as though he hoped they might change. Vanessa admitted I never controlled her career. She admitted I never demanded she leave her job. She admitted Adrien's wealth and attention made her feel important. She admitted she had planned her departure weeks before the engagement party. She admitted she let people believe I had driven her away because the truth made her look cruel. She admitted she shared private disagreements in ways that made me seem insecure. She admitted she stayed silent when friends mocked me. Finally, she admitted she left because standing beside Adrien made her feel more successful. The room felt smaller with every answer. Then I pointed to the group chat message. "Say it." Vanessa shook her head. "They can read it." "I read it 6 months ago. Say it." Her mother began crying quietly. Vanessa's father stared at the floor. She looked at me with anger first. Then the anger gave way to something closer to shame. I said Daniel was the kind of man women settle for when they're afraid they can't do better. Nobody moved. Vanessa took one breath and opened the empty velvet ring box. The gesture was so confident that for a second I almost admired it. She truly believed the confession had purchased her way back. I picked up a champagne glass from the tray near the doorway. Her expression softened. "Thank you," I said. "I needed them to hear it from you." I raised the glass, but I didn't raise it toward her. The conversation had run close to the scheduled start of our engagement celebration. Elise had arrived with her parents. The remaining guests were waiting in the dining room. My father moved a flower box that had been left near the fireplace during setup. Behind it stood a gold-lettered sign. "Congratulations, Daniel and Elise." The cake was carried in and turned toward the room. D and E. Elise stepped through the doorway. She didn't smile at Vanessa. She didn't glare either. She walked to me and took my hand. Vanessa already knew I had been spending time with Elise. Mutual friends had told her. She had dismissed Elise as familiar, safe, temporary. Then she saw the ring on Elise's finger. Vanessa's face emptied. She looked at Elise, then at me. "Did you trick me just to humiliate me?" "This gathering was already happening. You asked for an audience." "You let me think. I told you why you were coming. You knew what I believed." "I knew you ignored what I said." She looked around the room for support. Her parents had heard the terms of the meeting. So had Paige. So had the friends she had misled. No one told her I had promised anything more. The ring box was still open in her hand. I raised my glass toward Elise. To Elise, the woman who never needed me to look impressive before she decided I had value. The guests lifted their glasses. Elise's fingers tightened around mine. Vanessa stood alone beside the coffee table, surrounded by the screenshots and messages she had believed she could explain away. She had returned expecting to reclaim her place. Instead, she had cleared the final lie out of the room before I announced my future with someone else. Vanessa closed the ring box. The click sounded louder than it should have. Then she left with her parents. I didn't follow her. The next morning, she posted a correction publicly, and in the same group chat where she had insulted me. She admitted I had never forced her to leave. She admitted her earlier claims were dishonest. She deleted the post later that day, but several people had already taken screenshots. Paige sent one to me. I didn't answer. I blocked Vanessa's new number and put my phone face down. Later, after the guests had gone, Elise and I sat at my parents' kitchen table eating leftover engagement cake from paper plates. She studied me for a moment. "Do you feel satisfied?" I looked toward the dining room. The gold-lettered sign was still beside the fireplace. Half the flowers had been taken home by guests. The room smelled like coffee and extinguished candles. Then I looked at Elise. I feel finished. For 6 months, Vanessa's silence had forced me to live inside a story she wrote about me. In the end, I didn't need to chase her or convince everyone I had value. I gave her the room she wanted, and the truth finally decided which parts of my past were allowed to follow me forward. If this story pulled you in, leave a like and subscribe for more stories about betrayal, consequences, and the moment someone finally realizes the life they discarded didn't wait for them.